The storm came out of nowhere, a monster of black clouds and howling wind swallowing the horizon whole. Captain Elias Voss gripped the wheel of the Marigold, his knuckles white as the old fishing boat lurched against the waves. Salt spray stung his face and the radio had gone dead an hour ago. He was alone, just the sea and the storm, until a jagged fork of lightning split the sky. That's when he saw it, a dark shape bobbing in the churning water. Not debris. A man. Elias squinted through the rain, heart hammering. The stranger wasn't moving, his body limp as the waves tossed him like driftwood. For a heartbeat, Elias hesitated. Going overboard in this weather was suicide. But then the lightning flashed again and he saw it, the tattoo on the man's forearm. Faded but unmistakable, USS Titan, Navy. And beneath it, a jagged scar still bleeding. Whoever this was, he hadn't just fallen, he'd been left for dead. Elias cursed, grabbed a rope and dove into the storm. The icy water hit Elias like a fist, driving the air from his lungs. Waves clawed at him as he fought toward the unconscious man, the rope around his waist pulling taut against the Marigold's drift. Every stroke was a battle, against the current, against the storm, against the clock. His fingers finally closed around the stranger's collar, and he dragged him close. The man was heavier than he looked, his body rigid with cold, lips tinged blue. A gash above his temple seeped crimson into the salt water. Hauling them both back to the boat was agony. The rope bit into Elias' ribs as the waves tried to tear them apart. Finn, his first mate, leaned over the railing, shouting curses drowned by the wind. Together, they wrestled the stranger onto the deck, where he collapsed like a sack of stones. Finn pressed 2 fingers to the man's throat. "Alive," he muttered, "but not for long if we don't get him warm." Elias peeled back the man's soaked jacket, revealing a dog tag tangled in the fabric. He wiped away grime, LT Commander Jace Riker, USN, and beneath it an emblem he didn't recognize, an eagle clutching a trident ringed by stars, classified. Finn sucked in a breath. "That's no regular Navy," he said, backing away like the metal burned. "Special Ops, Black Ops, the kind of trouble that sinks boats and the fools who find it." Elias ignored him, pressing an ear to Jace's chest. A faint, ragged heartbeat. Then the man's hand shot up, clamping around Elias' wrist with terrifying strength. His eyes flew open, not the glassy stare of a drowning victim, but sharp, desperate. "They're coming," he rasped, salt water dripping from his lips like a warning. "Don't let them take it." A crack of thunder shook the boat. Finn crossed himself, and in the distance, beyond the storm's wrath, Elias could have sworn he heard the low, grinding hum of engines. Not a ship, a submarine. The cabin smelled of damp wool and old fish, the only light a flickering kerosene lamp that painted shadows on the warped wooden walls. Elias draped a blanket over Jace's shivering shoulders, the man's military posture at odds with the way his fingers trembled around the tin mug of whiskey. "Drink," Elias ordered. "You're no use to anyone dead." Jace swallowed hard, his gaze darting to the door every few seconds like he expected it to burst open. Finn leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "We should have left him in the water," he muttered, but Elias shot him a glare that could freeze hell. Jace set the mug down with a clatter. "You saw the tattoo," he said, voice raw, not a question. Elias nodded. "USS Titan, she went down 6 months ago. Official report said mechanical failure." A muscle in Jace's jaw twitched. "Bullshit, we were scuttled, Hargrove's orders." The name hung in the air like smoke. Admiral Cole Hargrove, decorated, untouchable. Outside, the storm had quieted to a drizzle, but the tension in the cabin thickened. Finn scoffed. "And why would a Navy admiral sink his own men?" Jace's hand went to his dog tag, thumb rubbing the classified emblem. "Because we found out what they're really testing in the trench." Before he could say more, a crash echoed from the dock, wood splintering, metal groaning. Elias snatched his shotgun from the wall. "Stay here," he barked at Jace, but the commander was already on his feet, swaying like a drunk. "Too late," he whispered. Elias kicked the door open to find his bait crate smashed to pieces. At first he thought it was the storm until he spotted the briefcase. Black, sleek, half buried in the splinters, its latches sealed with a numeric keypad. "That wasn't there before," Finn breathed. Jace staggered forward, face pale. "It's the proof," he said. "They must have dumped it when they—" Headlights sliced through the fog. A sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop at the end of the dock, door creaking open. Sheriff Dawes, a bear of a man with a voice like gravel, hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Elias," he called, "heard you pulled a stray out the drink." His eyes locked onto Jace. "That him?" Elias stepped between them, shotgun loose at his side but ready. "Just a sailor who lost his way." Dawes smirked, nodding at the briefcase. "And I suppose that's his luggage." Behind them, Jace's hand inched toward his boot, where the glint of a knife hid. The radio on Dawes' hip crackled to life. "All units be advised, Unauthorized naval activity reported near the harbor. Possible fugitive in custody. Dawes' smile vanished. "Well, Elias," he sighed, hand resting on his sidearm, "seems you've gone and caught yourself a storm." Dawn bled across the horizon in streaks of bruised purple and gold, the calm after the storm hanging heavy over the marina. Elias hadn't slept, his shotgun resting across his knees as he kept watch from the creaking porch of his dockside shack. The briefcase, now hidden under loose floorboards, felt like a live grenade beneath his feet. Jace sat rigid at the kitchen table, cleaning his service pistol with methodical precision, while Finn paced like a caged animal. "We should toss that damn case in the deep and pretend we never saw it," Finn hissed for the 10th time. A low, guttural hum vibrated through the floorboards. At first, Elias thought it was the harbor ferry, until the water began churning 50 yards offshore. Bubbles erupted in a furious boil as something monstrous breached the surface. Black steel glistened under the rising sun, water cascading off the towering conning tower of a Virginia-class submarine. Elias' blood turned to ice. "They're not even hiding anymore," Jace whispered, sliding a magazine into his pistol with a decisive click. Boots pounded on the dock as a dozen armed Marines in full combat gear formed a perimeter around Elias' property. The air crackled with radio static as a launch boat detached from the submarine, cutting through the water with lethal precision. At its bow stood Admiral Cole Hargrove, his dress blues immaculate, his face carved from granite. Sheriff Dawes emerged from his cruiser, hands raised in placation. "Admiral, this is my jurisdiction." Hargrove didn't even glance at him. A single flick of his finger sent 2 Marines dragging Dawes aside. The Admiral's polished shoes echoed on the weathered dock as he stopped 10 feet from Elias' porch. "Captain Voss," he said, voice dripping with false camaraderie, "I'll take what belongs to the United States Navy." Elias spat into the dirt between them. "Funny way of showing gratitude for saving one of yours." Hargrove's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Riker is a traitor. That briefcase contains classified materials that threaten national security." Behind Elias, the cabin door creaked open. Jace stepped into the light, his pistol held low but ready. "It contains proof you murdered 137 sailors to cover up illegal weapons testing," Jace said, his voice carrying across the silent marina. The Admiral's composure cracked for just an instant, a twitch beneath his left eye. "You always were dramatic, Riker." He turned to his Marines. "Search the premises." Elias cocked his shotgun. "This is private property." Hargrove sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Captain, that weapon won't stop a SEAL team." He nodded toward the submarine's deck where snipers had taken position. "But by all means be a hero." The standoff stretched taut until Finn's panicked shout came from inside the cabin. "Elias, the floor!" A splintering crash cut him off as 2 Marines burst through the back window, rifles raised. Jace moved like lightning, putting himself between them and the loose floorboard. "You don't want to do this, boys," he growled at the young Marines. "That briefcase holds your brother's blood, Hargrove's blood." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the soldiers' faces. Hargrove saw it too. His hand went to his sidearm. A new sound cut through the tension, the thunder of helicopter blades. Every head snapped upward as a Coast Guard Jayhawk roared over the marina, its searchlight pinning Hargrove in a blinding circle. "Admiral Cole Hargrove," a voice boomed from the loudspeaker, "you are ordered to stand down by order of the Secretary of the Navy." Jace's breath left him in a rush. The distress call worked. Hargrove's face twisted into something unrecognizable. In that moment, Elias saw the truth, not a decorated officer but a cornered animal. The Admiral's hand tightened on his pistol. A single gunshot rang out. But it didn't come from Hargrove. Sheriff Dawes stood with his service weapon drawn, smoke curling from the barrel. The Admiral's pistol clattered to the dock as he clutched his bleeding shoulder. "Damn small-town cops," Hargrove snarled as Marines rushed to restrain him. As the sun finally cleared the horizon, Elias realized the entire marina had filled with fishermen, dockworkers, and veterans, many wearing Old Navy insignia. They'd come silently, armed with nothing but fishing gaffs and righteous anger. Jace met Elias' gaze, the ghost of a smile on his face. "Told you they were coming." The submarine's hatch clanged open one last time, not for more soldiers but for a delegation of Navy JAG officers in crisp uniforms. The tallest one approached, eyeing the briefcase now in Jace's hands. "Commander Riker," he said quietly, "let's go make history." And as the first reporter's cameras began flashing, Elias understood. This story wouldn't drown in the depths. it would ripple across the world. The Coast Guard's infirmary smelled of antiseptic and betrayal. Jace sat on the edge of the examination cot, wincing as the medic stitched the gash above his temple. Through the porthole window, he could see Hargrove being marched onto the submarine in handcuffs, the admiral's once impeccable uniform now wrinkled and stained. The sight should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it tasted like ashes. Elias leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You owe me the truth," he said, "not a request." Jace's fingers traced the USS Titan tattoo as the memory surfaced like a torpedo breaching dark water. "We were running deep-sea sonar tests off the Marianas Trench," he began, voice hollow. "Routine mission, until we picked up the signatures." His hand trembled slightly. 12 warheads on the seafloor, marked with Hargrove's personal authorization codes. The medic finished and left silently. Jace reached into his fatigue pocket and slid a waterlogged photograph across the table. Elias picked it up carefully, a crew photo, 17 sailors in dress whites all grinning beneath the Titan's massive sail. Jace tapped one face after another: Petty Officer Ruiz, Chief Warrant Officer Lee, Ensign Markov, all dead within 48 hours of reporting what we'd found. His thumb lingered on a freckled young woman at the end. "My sister, communications officer. They made sure she went down with the ship." Elias' gut twisted. "How'd you survive?" A bitter laugh escaped Jace's lips. "Pure luck. I was in the escape trunk when the charges detonated." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing an angry scar along his ribs. "Swam 3 miles through burning fuel to a life raft. Hargrove's hunters nearly found me 6 times before I washed up near your boat." Outside, the submarine's klaxon blared as it prepared to depart. Jace stood abruptly, the photograph crumpling in his fist. "Those warheads, they're not ours, at least not officially." He yanked open the briefcase retrieved from Elias' cabin, inside a stack of files stamped with a black Trident emblem. "Project Trident, a joint operation with private defense contractors to test banned thermobaric weapons. No oversight, no paper trail." He flipped open a file, revealing autopsy photos of fish with exploded organs. "And no concern for what happens when these things leak into the food chain." Elias' vision swam with images of his own fishing nets full of mutated catches these past months. The unexplained rashes on Finn's hands after hauling certain loads. "They've been poisoning my waters," he breathed. Jace nodded grimly, pulling a silver drive from his dog tags. Every transaction, every test result, every silenced whistleblower. He pressed it into Elias' callous palm. "Backup copy, in case." He didn't finish the thought. The infirmary door burst open. A JAG officer stood rigid in the doorway. "Commander, we're ready for your deposition." His eyes flicked to the files. "Those need to come with us." Jace hesitated, then grabbed Elias' shoulder. "Whatever happens next, thank you for pulling me out of the dark." As they led him away, Elias stared at the silver drive. It weighed nothing. It weighed everything. Outside, the first news helicopters circled like gulls over a fresh kill. The world was about to learn the truth. But Elias already knew one thing for certain: some storms never really end. They just change direction. The marina erupted into chaos as the submarine's engines roared to life, churning the water into a froth. Elias sprinted down the dock, the silver drive burning a hole in his pocket. Behind him, Finn shouted something drowned out by the sudden chatter of radio static and shouting voices. The crowd of fishermen and veterans had become a living barricade, their weathered faces set in grim determination as they blocked the naval police vehicles trying to reach the pier. A hand grabbed Elias' arm, Sheriff Dawes, his face slick with sweat. "You've got 5 minutes before Washington sends someone who won't ask nicely for that evidence," he panted, shoving a set of truck keys into Elias' hand. "Take the old logging road north. Coast Guard station at Miller's Point will give you sanctuary." Elias didn't have time to question why the sheriff had switched sides. A metallic screech cut through the air as 2 black SUVs plowed through the marina gate, tires spitting gravel. Men in unmarked tactical gear poured out, their rifles sweeping the crowd. Not Navy, not anymore. Finn materialized at his side, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. "They tossed Jace in the back of that second SUV, he hissed. "Saw him clock him with a rifle butt when he tried to run." Elias' vision tunneled. He dragged this man from the sea only to watch him disappear into some black sight. The silver drive suddenly felt heavier. He made his choice. The truck's engine screamed to life as Elias floored it straight toward the waterfront. Fishermen scattered as he veered onto the wooden pier, planks exploding under the tires. The lead SUV gave chase. its bumper clipping the edge of the dock. For one suspended second, the world narrowed to the submarine's shrinking silhouette, the SUV's snarling grille in the rearview, and the cold calculation in Elias' gut. He yanked the wheel hard left. The truck plowed through the railing and became airborne. Elias had time to register Finn's screamed curse before they hit the water with a concussive slap. Darkness. The impact drove the breath from Elias' lungs. Salt water poured through the shattered windshield as the truck sank like a stone. Finn clawed at his seatbelt, eyes wild in the murky green light. Elias fumbled for the door handle jammed. The dashboard lights flickered, illuminating the depth gauge on his wrist, 20 feet and sinking fast. Then, miraculously, the silver drive floated up from his pocket, glinting like a minnow. Elias grabbed it and smashed the window with his elbow. The ocean rushed in. They kicked toward the surface just as shadows moved above them. Not rescuers, divers. One leveled a spear gun. A harpoon whistled past Elias' ear, then another, and another. The water erupted with activity as a dozen fishermen in scuba gear descended like avenging angels, their spear guns driving the Black Ops divers back. Old Man Henderson, who'd fished these waters for 40 years, gave Elias a thumbs-up before chasing an operative toward the bottom. Breaking the surface, Elias gasped for air to the sound of roaring outboard motors. The veterans had mobilized their fishing fleet, a ragtag armada of trawlers and dinghies now circling the submarine. On the deck of the lead boat, Sheriff Dawes stood with a bullhorn, shouting about federal warrants and habeas corpus. The submarine's hatch burst open. Admiral Hargrove emerged, his uniform jacket gone, face contorted with rage. "This is a national security." A new sound cut him off, the womp-womp-womp of approaching helicopters. Not military. News choppers, their cameras zooming in on the unfolding drama. Jace appeared at the submarine's railing, flanked by 2 JAG officers. His left eye was swollen shut, but he stood straight as he locked eyes with Elias. "It's over," he mouthed. And for the first time, Elias believed it might be true. The silver drive in his hand suddenly felt lighter. The weight had shifted. The world was watching now. As the Coast Guard cutters finally appeared on the horizon, Elias treaded water and watched history unfold. The submarine's engines died. The Black Ops teams lowered their weapons, and Admiral Hargrove's shoulders slumped in defeat as the cameras captured every moment. Justice, Elias realized, didn't always come from above. Sometimes it rose from the depths. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale regret. Elias sat stiffly in the witness chair, his salt-crusted hands gripping his knees as the prosecutor displayed the silver drive's contents on the oversized monitors. Grainy underwater footage showed the warheads resting on the ocean floor, their serial numbers clearly visible beside Hargrove's authorization codes. The admiral sat at the defense table, his uniform stripped of medals, looking suddenly every one of his 63 years. Jace, now wearing a lieutenant commander's uniform with a fresh bandage peeking from his collar, caught Elias' eye from the gallery. His sister's foe sat framed on the evidence table beside a stack of crew manifests, all 137 names now etched into the public record. The cameras in the back of the room whirred incessantly, broadcasting every damning detail to a nation that had woken up to the scandal dubbed Trident's betrayal. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Admiral Cole Hargrove, this court finds you guilty of treason, mass murder, and violations of the Biological Weapons Convention." The words hung in the air, thick enough to choke on. "You will spend the remainder of your natural life at the United States Disciplinary Barracks." Hargrove didn't flinch as the MPs led him away, but his polished facade finally cracked when he passed Jace's row. "You sank the Navy to save some fish," he spat. Jace stood slowly, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "No, sir, I saved the Navy from you." Outside, the summer sun beat down on the courthouse steps where reporters swarmed. Elias pushed through them, desperate for air, until a familiar voice called his name. Jace stood by a gleaming new fishing boat, the Riker's Revenge painted in bold letters across the stern. "Commissioned her this morning," Jace said, tossing Elias the keys. "Every whistleblower's compensation fund dollar well spent." Elias ran his hand along the pristine railing, his throat tight. "Your sister would've." "Loved the irony," Jace finished with a watery smile. He nodded toward the harbor, where the first cleanup ships were already heading out to retrieve the warheads. "We're giving the Titan crew proper burials at sea next week. You should be there." A horn blared from the water. The submarine, The same one that had surfaced at Elias dock now flew a different flag as it prepared to deploy scientists instead of weapons. Its crew saluted as they passed the Riker's Revenge. That night back at his rebuilt cabin, Elias hung two new items on the wall: Jace's USS Titan photo and a framed front-page headline: Fisherman and whistleblower expose billion-dollar scandal. The weight in his chest had finally lifted. The sea outside his window glittered under the moonlight, calm and endless. For the first time in months, it looked like home again. The sea never forgets. It holds stories in its currents, whispers of courage that ripple far beyond any single life. What began as a fisherman's act of mercy became a tidal wave of truth, sweeping away corruption that had festered in the dark. Look at Elias Voss now, standing on the deck of the Riker's Revenge, his hands no longer cracked from cold but sun-warmed and steady. That tattoo on his forearm, a perfect match to Jace's, catches the light as he casts his nets into cleansed waters. The USS Titan's legacy doesn't haunt him, it fuels him. Every fish hauled aboard is proof that the world can heal when good men refuse to look away. And Jace? He walks a different dock these days in a uniform adorned with new medals, ones that honor honesty over obedience. The photograph of his sister hangs in the Naval Intelligence briefing room, a reminder that some orders should never be followed. When he visits Elias, they don't speak of submarines or courtrooms. They sit in comfortable silence, watching the horizon, two men bound by a truth that could have drowned them both. As for Hargrove, prison bars can't contain a guilt that heavy. They say he wakes screaming about trenches and tridents about faces in the deep. The sea remembers, and so do we. So when you next stand at the water's edge, listen closely. That's not just the wind you hear, it's the echo of choices that changed everything. One man pulled another from the dark, and in doing so, they pulled the light back in.